It is my distinct pleasure to have all of you join us today. We're very excited to introduce you to the EnableMakeathon for those who are coming here for the first time. We're especially glad to have Christine from the ICRC with us. She's the Deputy Head of Delegation, and this is her first time meeting all our entrepreneurs in the audience.
She's the Vice President.
The Vice President of the ICRC. My apologies. Okay. So, to quickly recap why we're here. So, the EnableMakeathon has been shepherded by the ICRC as a movement to create assistive devices and technologies for people with different disabilities. The competition, which started in August and which runs for approximately 4 months, brings together entrepreneurs, designers, and humanitarians from across the world working on different kinds of disabilities and devices together, and supports them by helping them find the right access to mentors, prototyping the idea, testing the idea, and then finally accessing prize money and potentially support with incubators and accelerators. So today, we're going to, following this, have a panel discussion, and then each of you has the opportunity to interact with these panelists. I would, before that, like to introduce you to Christine and then invite her up, but let me tell you a little bit about her. Christine began her political career in 1980. She was a member of the Legislative Assembly of the Canton of Bern from 1986 until her election in 1991 to the upper house of the Swiss Parliament, where she remained there until retiring in 2008. While in Parliament, Ms. Bailey chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Committee for Social Security and Health, and the Caucus for the Free Democratic Party. Since 2006, she has headed Swissmedic, the Swiss Supervisory Authority for Therapeutic Products. In 2008, Ms. Bailey was appointed Permanent Vice President of the ICRC, and as such, she's a member of the ICRC Assembly and the Assembly Council and the Office of the President. In particular, she focuses on the development of governance and internal control mechanisms, helping ensure they are coherent and run smoothly, and on strengthening and developing relationships within the ICRC and Red Crescent movement. Please put your hands together for Christine.
Thank you very much, Sanja. This is much too much about me. This is about you all here. And that's why I'm here also. I'm so happy to be here. It's a really exciting opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, to be here in Bangalore and give my support to this Enabling Makeathon. This is, as a matter of fact, my first Enabling Makeathon, and I'm really thrilled to be here. We have an exceptional opportunity to work with great partners in the field of disability innovation. This year, this is really something very exceptional, and we look forward to seeing how these different stakeholders collaborate together to help the selected teams turn the ideas to reality. It seems nothing but natural it's very natural to me even that innovation and innovational thinking and also creative working has to serve people in need, and all these people in need who are who have to live with disabilities. I think this is a very important thing to bring together innovation, high technology, the corporate world and the world of the disabilities. ICRC is more than just a 100 years old organization. Over the years, we have also learned to adapt to new situations. That's why we have been able to live more than 150 years old. And we have also learned to look at the new necessities, and most importantly, we have learned to listen and to innovate. Some of it has been on the job, of course, in the field where we are working, and some of it has been in thorough processes, such as this Enabling Makeathon, which is running simultaneously here in Bangalore, but also in London. Just as we are here together, it's also running in London. It is important that innovation bridges gaps for persons with disabilities. The ideas for the first Enabling Makeathon in 2015 was to have an intense program that sets the focus on innovation with and by persons with disabilities. Its key components were needs assessment and Then also collection of special partners and learning and to help find solutions together with others. It's culminated in 5 devices from over 180 designs. Among these are an adjustable sitting and standing support for children with cerebral paralysis and a clip-on attachment for wheelchairs to make them usable also outdoors. These are now being clinically tested at the hospital and at several hospitals in India and also at centers for disability, and then we would like to roll it out globally. The journey this year has been very exciting so far and has created a space for persons with disabilities, innovators, entrepreneurs, and humanitarian organizations to come together and work on creating solutions to challenges faced by those who need it most. We have also entered into a new partnership, including the one with Global Disability Innovation Hub, the GDI, in the UK, who is now running this parallel event I just mentioned before. India has worldwide gathered a reputation for frugal innovation. I'm told one of the popular words in this multilingual country is this of jugaad. With this, is this India's talent, the enabling environment and the socio-economic atmosphere lends itself perfectly to creating, testing and exporting new solutions to the rest of the world, and that's what we would like to do. I also realize that I'm in a city which has been the center of innovation. It's a real buzz here in Bangalore, and hence we also, it was a very natural choice to come here and have our EnableMakeathon here in Bangalore. I look forward to both the panel discussion and the meeting of the innovators. We have been the ones who have been shortlisted after an intense discussion between persons with disabilities and the other stakeholders I just mentioned before. We rely on you today to provide us with some of the solutions that we hope to be able to use in the complex operational context that the ICRC is working worldwide. As a successful example of a country that harnesses innovation, India can help other countries take up similar innovation projects and afterwards implement them in the daily work and the daily operations. The EnableMakeathon core principle is listening to needs and inclusive of persons with disabilities in the co-creation of the solutions. I'm really looking forward to listen now, to listen to the panelists, to listen to all what they have to say, and afterwards also to listen to the creators and to look at their projects. And I wish you a very inspiring and interesting afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. I now have the pleasure of introducing you to the panelists. To start off with, we have Mr. Mohan Sundaram. Mohan Sundaram is the founder and CEO of RT Labs and a very familiar face for everyone in the EnableMakeathon ecosystem. He's a trustee and board member of the Association for People with Disability based in Bangalore, an advisor to the Disability NGO Alliance. His experience has been in the technology sector, spread over 3 decades across companies and startups, and he's actively involved in mentoring numerous startups across the country, both in the disability and non-disability space. Please put your hands together for Mohan. Advait. I next have the pleasure of introducing you to Mr. Mahantesh. Mr. Mahantesh is the managing trustee and founder of the Samarthanam Trust for Disabled. He is the president of the World Blind Cricket and President Cricket Association for the Blind in India. Over the years, he has been a disability leader and role model and has positively impacted the lives of countless people, particularly those who are visually impaired. Please put your hands together to welcome Mr. Mahantesh on stage. I next have the pleasure of introducing you to Ms. Deepa Narasimhan. Deepa is the head of diversity and inclusion at Dell India, and she has been a phenomenal change agent and advocacy for the rights and for gender equality and the rights of persons with disability. Her efforts in mainstreaming persons with disability within Dell, as well as other organizations, has made her a change agent. She has represented disability in numerous industry forums and has recently led the India Inclusion Summit and TEDx Bangalore. Please put your hands together for Deepa. I would now like to introduce Mr. Shakti. For anyone who's on Twitter, I'm sure you know him. He's a tech analyst, a disability activist, and he also runs the very popular blog, The Quill, which reviews the latest innovations and technologies to help. He also works to improve employability for persons with disability and also teaches social media skills to people who are differently able. Finally, he also helps make workplaces more accessible by helping to bring in changes within existing resources. Please put your hands together for Shakti. But before I introduce the panel lead today, we have one extra set of flowers we forgot to give Miss Christine. So I call Shirish to please give her a bouquet of flowers. So leading today's panel is... Well done, huh? So, on a quick side note, if you see at the back, there's a bunch of 11 kids from DPS. And over the last 2 days, and over the next coming week, they're actually tailing all the teams. So they follow the teams, they take pictures and videos of what they're doing. And why it's particularly interesting is this DPS is an inclusive school. So all these children go to class with children who have disabilities. They are sensitive, thoughtful, and very helpful to us. I think round of applause for them. So finally, the panel lead today is Jeremy England, who I assure you is not English. I made this mistake. I also took away his favorite dinner party joke. But Jeremy England took up the post of the ICRC's head of regional delegation in New Delhi in July 2016. In addition to India, the delegation also covers Nepal, Bhutan, and the Maldives, providing humanitarian expertise, services, and partnerships across the region. He's worked in the humanitarian space for nearly 25 years, or over 25 years, across the world, and I assure you he'll make for very interesting conversation after this panel, so please find him. Put your hands together for Jeremy.
Well, thanks, Sanjana. The only person she didn't introduce was herself. Sanjana is a global shaper from the World Economic Forum and a big partner that we've worked with both for EnableMakeathon 1 and 2. She's a real connector of people who need to be busy in this sector. So thank you, Sanjana. And wow, what a buzz. Great to be here with all of you. Fantastic to have all these experts around me. I'm a bit nervous to pretend to moderate them. We've been through a process over the last couple of years where ICRC has been the village child, while the village elders have been bringing us up in the innovation space. And so we've been doing a lot of learning here in India over the last couple of years. Thanks to many of you in this audience, and particularly to many of you on this panel. And what's also exciting for me today here is to have not only our top leadership from Geneva, who's going to take back the buzz that we have in this room and in this town to our global leadership decision-making process, but also to have our global lead on innovation, Tarun, who's been really the motor within ICRC for the last many years, that we would be brave enough to start working in this sector. ICRC has always innovated to stay alive and to work in very difficult conflict zones around the world. But we have learned one thing in 150 years, which is that we need to keep learning if we want to stay relevant. And we come to Bangalore first and foremost to learn. We learned, I'm going to just touch on 4 things that we've learned, and then I'm going to pass to the panel one by one. Each of them have 10 minutes to add their particular views and messages, and then we'll have a bit of a debate. Each thing that I mentioned that we've learned, these people are the experts in, so you'll get all the detail from them rather than me. The 4 things I learned were to bridge, to involve, to collaborate, and to manage. And let me just unpack each of those. The bridging is about how we look at technology. It is possibly a force to level the playing field and include everybody and reduce the extremes that we're all facing. It's equally possible that the good technology goes to the people who already have access and who already have opportunity. So ICRC's interest in technology is really only one thing: to see how this can be used for those who don't normally have access to it. And that's why I think my Vice President mentioned the frugal innovation tradition in this part of the world and the socio-economic testing ground you have. Every different environment, every different religion, every different talent available in this country that can test things that we can use to make sure people are not left behind. If technology is creating further division in this world, it's not really helping. So our interest is on how technology and innovation can bridge divides. Involve. We know we can't bridge divides unless we're including the people who are currently excluded. And so when we started this process, we were thinking, well, let's focus in different areas. Let's focus on people with disabilities, and let's see what we can design or innovate or collaborate on with a view to their betterment. There's no such thing as their betterment. There's only a process that involves the people concerned. Nothing else will ever work. We know that from all our relief programming in the Red Cross, all our development programming in the Red Cross, all across the world. But it's equally true in innovation. We learned that if we don't have the government framework and the policy in mind, but above all, the people who we think need this in mind, if they are not at the table, if they are not testing the designs, if they are not in fact establishing the challenge and the needs in the first place, and if they're not involved in the process to roll out whatever has been innovated, we will have no serious impact. That sounds obvious. Of course, listen to the people who need it. It's not so obvious. If we're thinking of those people with different levels of ability who are left out, it's not just those people who may be facing disabilities. There are many people who face disabilities. Some of them are on the panel with us today, who have extraordinary means of becoming global leaders and innovators and influencers in their own right. But there are another group of people with disabilities who have not managed and don't have those same capacities and supports and talents. And it's about making sure those others are at our table as well. That makes our innovation process, we hope, useful. Collaborate. Nothing a designer can do, nothing a humanitarian agency can do is going to work on its own. We simply know deep down inside that we're not good enough on our own. I think all of you know that as well, which is why you've come today. We are good when we come together and we bring each our own individual contribution. I think that's also what was mentioned in the initial speech. This whole ecosystem that's been created, the whole networks that have been brought together, that is something we look to maintain. We don't look to own it or control it or even know where it's going to go. But we think that ecosystem, we call it the Enable movement. We hope that that will be able to keep coming up with the ideas and the processes that will move things forward. And the last thing is manage, and it's a boring thing, and nobody likes talking about it. Innovation is supposed to be fun, it's a buzz, we're all excited, new ideas and new projects. We have to keep reminding ourselves in our process that we need quite strict management processes. We need to start with a real assessment of the needs, not with just a bright idea somebody came up with. Real assessment of what is needed to help the people we're actually involved with. Then we've got to go through all those processes of design and testing and consultation and development. We've also got to evaluate if this is getting to anyone. If it doesn't have last mile delivery, if you're not evaluating your last mile delivery, if you're not refining the process back at the beginning of the cycle again, you're not adding to the quality of what we're working on. And that's difficult. In the makerspace, there's all kinds of bright minds making things, and they all have an expertise. And what I think is so rich about the people in this room is that you all bring different expertise: financial, business, design, social welfare, distribution methodology, all kinds of ideas. It's the fact that you're willing to collaborate that makes you strong, and I think I congratulate all of you for that. So those are the 4 things we learned as the village idiot sitting at the feet of all of you. And I now would like to pass to the panel for them to speak about the key issues that they have seen in this sector and they wish us to take note of as we go on this journey towards creating better solutions for people who need them. So let me first call upon my old friend Mohan. He's been the founder and mentor of our whole EnableMakeathon and movement. The floor is going to be yours now, and we'll give you 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
So I'll touch upon a few aspects. The first is the relevance of technology, and a lot of stuff that we're doing here is in the space of technology. In this Makeathon, of course, we have something in the area of processes too. But by and large, there's a lot of work being done on technology. And as Jeremy said, it creates a level playing field. I will come in from the rights perspective, right? So if you look at the Constitution and all the laws that have been made, people have made laws to say that, hey, can we have reservation for people who are underprivileged, who don't have access to education, who don't have access to various resources that the country has to offer, right? It has been 70 years and things have been going on. And a lot of these groups have had the advantage of having privileged access to these resources by law. The sad fact is there is one group, one marginalized group that could not take advantage of that, and that is the disabled. Reason being, access to these resources is not just enabled by law alone. If you don't have the technology to access those resources, forget whatever law that you may have. You still have no access to it. You're still 70 years. So, in a sense, if you look at the disability sector, in terms of accessibility to resources that any country has to offer for their well-being or progress, the sector is 70 years behind. This is just to put in perspective what we're talking about, right? And I think that is something very important to note. Where does this manifest itself? It manifests everywhere. You don't have buildings that are accessible. You don't have locations of government service that are accessible, right? There's always a challenge for a person with disability to access any of these. Even today, when we have been about 70 years of independence and we have had time to work out things for our own selves, forget anybody else doing something for you, right? So that is the state, and the reason why I state this is technology is the single most important factor that will play a role in making sure that anything that the country or the world has to offer is accessible to people with disability, and that's what gives it its preeminent position in any kind of innovation that you're trying to endeavor for this sector. And I think amongst other businesses, the aspect of technology plays a far greater role in the area of disability. So that is one about technology. The next question is, all right, yeah, we know that technology is important, but why should one at all innovate for this sector? Why should one even look at technology solutions for this sector? I'm not sure how many of you know statistics. WHO statistics say that 15% of the world population is disabled. So next question is, does somebody want to ignore a market which is 15% of the population? Right? I don't think anybody would want to. The second aspect is, forget 15% of the population, even innovators for themselves should decide, should they not invest their time for their own selves? However self-centered one may be in thinking, one cannot overlook the fact that one will be disabled at some point of time in life. If not today, maybe by accident or maybe by old age. If not yourself, you will come in direct contact with it within your immediate family very soon, right? So there is a very selfish motive in terms of looking at technology and innovation for the sector, because those who contribute will in any case also become benefactors of that innovation or technology. The third aspect is that it's there for the whole world to see. Anything that has been innovated for disability. I have a very simple example. You have a building with steps, you have a building with ramps, and you go and observe what happens in that building. 90% of the people, able or disabled, will take the ramp, right? Why does this happen? The fact is, it is easier for you to use a ramp as compared to using steps. If you're given a choice of a ramp and a step, you will choose a ramp because that is easier to use. So you feel more comfortable using a ramp. This is exactly what disability does. It makes you think beyond what you're capable. If you make something easy using technology for people with disability, there is a natural progression and acceptance by people who are able-bodied to use the same technology. I have a couple of examples here. How many of you use SMS or have used SMS? Wow, you should thank you to the deaf, each one of you. The spec came into GSM in 1995 for SMS as an afterthought, which is why it uses the control channel of GSM for people with deafness to be able to communicate with the near and dear in emergency situations. If that thought had not come in place, you would not have had SMS. Another famous example is a keyboard. I'm sure everybody's used a keyboard. How many of you know that the keyboard is innovated for a blind person to write letters to her friend? That's what brought about a keyboard. Right? So there are a lot of such examples that one can quote and say, if you think of any product or any service or anything at all that you can use technology to make something usable by the disabled community, you will have tremendous effect on the able-bodied community itself. And so one is not really designing products for the disabled community, you're designing better products for the whole world and not just for the disabled community. And once you get to understand this, then it becomes very natural as to how one would look at innovation with a very wide perspective that will benefit all. Right? So that's my thought on technology and innovation and what one would need to do.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. I picked up two very clear points. Rights without means would be meaningless. And why innovate? It's lost potential for all of us if we don't innovate for disabled. Fantastic. Very clear. And even within the 10 minutes. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So then let me move on and invite Mahantesh for your views.
So can I stand and speak or sit?
As you wish. We are all sitting, but up to you.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. So it's really an honor to be a part of this wonderful
Very
panel.
clear message. Thank you. Very
so Mohan sir has already briefed you.
You've done this
views on innovation, especially keeping technology in mind. So we are in a fast changing world. Definitely whatever you innovate and develop product, invent, for persons with disability, it can be used by anybody and everybody. So I have few thoughts. One is especially in the recent past, both man-made and natural disasters are making many people disabled. So especially people who are disabled, who succumb to that disaster, are the major victims. They get completely ignored. Because last year when I was in Nepal, I was talking to my cricket counterpart. He's a completely visually impaired. When Nepal was hit with bad earthquake, he was left all by himself. Nobody was there to kind of move him. Everybody left him and ran out. So like this, people with disability, people with visual impairment, or people on wheelchair, they get left by themselves because everybody wants to rescue their life first. So so now a lot of government and corporates are putting money on relief funds and all. If they can invest the same on innovation, so that at times of such disasters, how people with disability could be rescued. So some of the points I feel innovator should keep in mind, especially listening to this topic itself, listening to the needs, humanitarian innovation, entrepreneurship and inclusion is a very holistic theme. The innovation should be acceptable by and large. It should have a desirability. It should be feasible, technically feasible, viable to make and viable to buy, affordability. And it should be possible, quickly makeable at times of disasters and big needs. it should be quickly makeable. And all products, if you design it universally accessible, affordable, and usable, so the product what one does or creates will have a longevity, and especially entrepreneurship from social perspective, because the social entrepreneur, his profit is its sustainability and scalability. So how it can stay for a long time or if forever, and how it is scalable, how it can reach more people. And especially technology now, technology doesn't discriminate. If it is developed keeping in needs of all kinds of persons with disability, it will serve large purpose, and it is economically viable. As rightly Mr. Mohan sir said about the statistics of WHO, close to 1/6 of the world's population has some challenges. If the needs of every individual is kept in mind when you do a research and innovate and develop a product, so you will reap the benefit of at least 1/6, more than that, extra. So one example I would like to give, mobile. I'm a big fan of mobile because many social initiatives I am heading, it is all possible because of the wonderful tool mobile and the laptop. Both of them read to me everything, whatever is on the screen. Sir said about SMS, the technology for hearing impaired. Thanks to some of the innovators who developed screen reader, both in mobile and laptop, even both iOS and Android. So they have made our life so accessible, so available, and we can communicate to anybody and everybody, and people also can communicate to us directly. Otherwise, 10, 20 years ago, or 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, if someone writes a letter, I had to depend on someone to read. If it was a secret letter, you can imagine. Or probably I could not have asked for any secret letters. So now if anybody sends me a mail, I can read by myself, and I can delete it, and I can respond what I want. So this is the beauty of technology, and especially when innovations are made keeping everybody's needs in mind. It's just a personal opinion. A lot of companies, as a part of their CSR investment, end up putting it into relief funds, PM relief funds and all. If they can invest in creating innovations, if they can put money and develop products which are useful, beneficial to anybody and everybody at times of disaster, or persons with disability. Anybody can become disabled by natural diseases or sometimes accident. So if they invest some part of money on invention and innovation and adaptation. So many times, many products can be made slightly adaptable. So like cricket for the blind, if I want to give you an example. I don't know how many of you know blind cricket. Have you all heard of blind cricket? Yes? Yeah, so in India, cricket is a religion, Christine, and so it unifies us, no boundary. So I really caught up to cricket myself and wanted to play a lot of cricket, but I used regular ball those days. But in 1988-89, there was a invention or innovation, you can say, similar ball made of fiber plastic, small bearings inside. It makes rattling noise. So with slight modification in the rules and all, now every visually impaired can play the game of cricket. We could organize World Cups. Blind cricketers got chance to play World Cup. They won the World Cup. They represented the country. That is the kind of recognition we could bring by slight innovation and adaptation. So innovations also can be adaptation. So with this, I think I congratulate ICRC for organizing this EnableMakeathon. So I'm sure the products which emerges out will have lasting impact, will make a huge difference in people's life. I will be very, very happy to involve both my organizations, Cricket for the Blind and Samarthanam Trust for the Disabled. because visually impaired is one major group we are associated with. 24 states are affiliated to Cricket Association for the Blind, and our students and trainees will be very happy to test the products developed. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Mahantesh. Great to hear your thoughts, and great to have your partnership in our project as well. ICRC is really pleased to have you on board with the program. We also work with the Wheelchair Basketball Federation of India and the Paralympic Committee of India.
Wonderful.
So we are really excited to complete a bit the picture and to be working with you.
It'll be our honor.
We also, by the way, for those who are cricket mad, we host in Bangladesh the World Disabled Cricket Competition, not for blind but for physical disabilities. So I'm afraid to say that the English won it the last time, not New Zealand or India.
Ian Martin is a good friend of mine, and we were together in Bangladesh last week. Yeah, so
very good.
Yes.
Nice to have you on board. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you also for the challenge. You mentioned something very important about how do we take care of people with different abilities at times of major disaster and crisis. And I don't think we do it very well, to be honest, for all the reasons that you described. There are so many priorities and so many fears going on. But it is a field now where there's a number of innovations coming forward. We also know that there is a policy position here in India, in the National Disaster Management Authority, where they want to mainstream disability within the policies that they're working on going forward. It's also already mainstreamed within the work of the Indian Red Cross and the way that they prepare their emergency response volunteers. So we're partnering with my good friend Rajiv here from Karnataka branch of the Indian Red Cross to make sure that the volunteers who may be called upon to respond at times of small accident, first aid, or large disaster, would also have some awareness, at least to start with, who that may be leaving out by not planning correctly for disability. So that's already going into some training.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've even started, and we'll have this debate, I think, after the other two speakers. But what would be interesting for all of you to think about before the question and answer session is, what can we do more? What are the channels we should pursue going forward to get better at including everybody in the response to crisis?
Yeah. So one quick word. If we could be a part of National Disaster Committee, so like solutions can come from us, people with disability themselves. So if we are involved in planning and policy making, that may be one small
Bravo.
solution.
Involve.
Yes, involve.
Listen
us.
and involve. Absolutely.
Yes, as you said.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You mentioned also the role the corporate sector could play and the interests that should be there, both of you. Why this is actually, the technologies we invent are in fact useful to make sure the potential of everybody is fulfilled and really are an enormous market. So we have somebody from the corporate sector, Deepa, supported by Del. The floor is yours for 10 minutes.
Okay, so, let me just kind of give you like quick 3 or 4 things that happened from the morning, and we will take more on the Q&A. So the first thing, as a diversity person who heads Dell India, I was reading about the LinkedIn survey that just went ahead, talking about tech and diversity, and for startups and venture capitalists, right? And among the 5,000, that was surveyed, only 5% of them felt diversity was a key thing to run a startup, or it was, like a key thing that they had to address. Rest all felt it's not the key thing. And today I was called for ICRC's panel discussion. When I think about 2 different things, right, and here a room full of innovators looking at a potential market here, right, how do you sell your ideas to create a bigger impact is what you all have to be thinking, right? So I was thinking, why is a new person in a startup not feeling diversity as a big threat to be involved in their startups? Why not, right? Are they missing out on many things? The reason being said that sometimes, at least for people with disability, access becomes the major challenge. And we are in a very fast-paced world. So here in the room, when we went through the challenges on EnableMakeathon, I was in Delhi with Sushil and team. We went through a lot of challenge on employability, right, and access. we kind of felt that everything was critical for us when it comes to people with disability. We were like, no, we got to get this done. Simpler wheelchairs which are not costlier for people, we need them. Right? We need access to buildings. We need people mindset. How can we change mindset of people when it comes to believing skills and not just the disability, right? So we kept going on and on, like, let's go ahead, do this. And then the major thing was touching the grassroots, right? Are we only talking about mainstream? What about the grassroots, upbringing, right? So for us, I think you guys over here as innovators play a very important role to bridge those gaps. And I just want to give a big round of applause to see all these bright innovators here. I bet you're going to sell big ideas. I want to give you another example as well, right? So recently I had an opportunity to meet Tom Harkins, the Senator of US, and he is very big into disability movement, right? And when Tom was here in Bengaluru, he kind of met every organization trying to understand what was happening in India context, right? And he shared a very interesting story that I want to share with you also. You can take it forward when you want to sell your idea, right? So the point was, when big companies like Samsung and Sony, wanted to sell TVs, right, their products in the market, there was a small adapter kind of a thing which could subtitle all the language, and you could see the subtitling in the TV, right? So Tom was like, why is it only present in few TVs? So they worked it back with the government and found out that it's very costly to enable the technology in all the TVs, and the cost is going high, and they just wanted to keep a couple of TV having subtitles. Tom, being the strong person in that, he went ahead and said, every TV must have subtitling option. Today, and he also worked out that once you work out the cost for mass production, your production will be zero. Today, if you go and see some of your TVs have subtitling option, and the cost is zero now, right? So when you look at producing it for masses and not just one or two, standalone technology, that's where you can sell your idea great, right? And when you're trying to integrate your idea to something, please be sure that every product that you're building gets integrated. Like another example was, driverless cars, which is coming up, right? And he also mentioned that they want to ensure every driverless car is accessible. It has every feature for people with visual impairment, be it people with physical impairment, or be it people with hearing impairment. All the technology must be produced in the car. So in future, you want to take any driverless car, you can go ahead and take it, right? So I think that's where India has to move. And that's where our innovators have to move, selling their ideas. Because while the market doesn't look big sometimes, and it becomes too hard to sell your idea, but think about more innovative ways to make it and create masses. I think that would be what would create even the technology people to catch up with inclusion, right? We always keep talking about including people with disability on board. As a diversity person, like Christine's word jugaad, when I started my journey, I used a lot of jugaads to ensure that I'm on job, right? Like a sudden jugaad was making my car accessible, right? I just called a couple of people who worked on cars, asked them to put a ramp in. I had access to go to work, right? But today, keeping the same idea, we have Kickstart Cabs, which is an inclusive cab service in Bangalore, right? And which is building on. We have big players like Uber who are coming up with inclusive cabs. So when you think about certain jugaads for people, and when you create masses, it's actually going to create the impact and inclusion. So, for me, the thing is, I'm very happy that we are in a field where innovators are present in this market. You have a bright, we have 70 million people with disability in India. So you already know what your play field is, right? All you have to do is, keep your ideas strong and keep going. And platforms like ICRS, which is the EnableMakeathon, is creating such a beautiful framework for you to sell your ideas. So for me, as an employer, I am so happy to be part of this EnableMakeathon, because somewhere I'm benefiting it, trying to take it to the real people while there are innovators here. So my job is just to be the mediator. That's it. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you indeed. You've just identified the size of the market being 14 times the size of my entire country. But you made 3 more important points than that. The need for diversity in your business model. We're not going to get the best ideas or design inclusivity if our organizations aren't inclusive. That's the bottom line. And we have to make sure our project team, our organization is inclusive. Without that, we don't get to think in a way that ensures that these other issues, that all issues are mainstreamed. Second point you made was focus.
Yes.
Focus on who you're trying to help. And you mentioned grassroots, and I've mentioned before bottom of the pyramid. If those are the people you're trying to make sure are going to be included and are not so far, it takes focus. You don't just have an idea and build it up. You have to go out to where those people are and make sure they are in your work team. And you mentioned scale.
Yes.
If we get the scale right, the cost is negligible, if not
Yes, absolutely.
zero. Fantastic. Thank you very much for those points. Very, very clear. And thanks again for the timing. Fantastic. So the last person you're going to listen to, many of you I'm pretty sure have read or listened to already. Such is the reach of this man's social media empire, if I can call it like that. We're delighted to have you here with us, Shakti. The floor is yours for 10 minutes. Please share with us your thoughts.
Thank you very much. This always happens to me. I'm the eldest at home, but I get everything last. And I'll start with a big shout out to all the photographers who are doing calisthenics, aerobics, all sorts of exercises to cover us. Thank you, guys. Okay, and let's get to serious business now. How many of you do not have your mobiles on vibration mode? Raise your hands. Okay, I swear if I hear something ringing for the next 10 minutes, you're going to see the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde side of me, right? Okay. So now let's get to business, right? See, what are we talking about here? We are talking about inclusion and access, right? And we are talking about this word humanitarian, right? Now, humanitarian is not something additional that you need to add into your thought process. Humanitarian is not something you need to do along with what you're doing daily. Humanitarian is what you should be by default, right? That was part of this double helix that you inherited when this creature from the sea crawled out to the shore and decided to become the first living thing, right? So it's not something that we invented in 2017 to make a buzzword out of it. Most people react to it that way, which is very wrong. Next is the biggest hindrance to getting accessible, the biggest hindrance to being inclusive, right? Is that everybody has 10% of Amitabh Bachchan inside them, right? You start thinking of a problem, you start solving the problem. Once you hit your first roadblock, right? Inside you, you hear this voice. For those who don't understand Hindi, your neighbors can translate. हम जहाँ खड़े हो जाते हैं, line वहीं से शुरू होता है. My way or the highway, right? We don't think of anything else. We need to shed that first, right? And then think of what to do. So there are 3 aspects to inclusion as far as I'm concerned, right? And first of all, thank you for having me here. So many heavyweights in the field, and I'm like a baby, right? The only thing I've done good is I have about 160,000 people following me on Twitter, and Barack Obama happens to be one of them, right? He doesn't know how fat I am, so let's get back to the serious issues on hand, right? So there are three aspects to fixing accessibility and bringing in inclusion. One is you, right? You are the beginning of any change. You are the beginning of any change process. But then you are a part of something bigger. That brings us to the second thing, right? Society. The society is the canvas for you to do whatever you want to do. What is society? Society is you and people who are immediately around you. Stop thinking beyond that. When you start thinking beyond that is when you start envisioning ghosts that do not exist, right? And the third and final part is technology, right? In India, we have technology nailed, right? We are people who invented, having a loudspeaker with a man reading out answers for people writing 10th standard exams in a state. Right? If that is not technology, I don't know what is technology. Right? To explain Jugaad that she started, right? This is extreme Jugaad for public benefit. Right? So these are simple problems to solve technically. But then like I was talking to Dipali and others, right? Technology is just 30% of the solution. 70% is change of mindset, right? Today, if my wife is sitting here, we've been married for 20 years. I have a teenage son, 15 years old. Now, we go into a restaurant. The first question is, oh, you're married. You're on a wheelchair and you're married. I'm like, yes, I won the lottery 20 years ago. And then my son washes his hands and comes to say, oh, you have a teenage kid. I mean, yes, last Diwali there was a sale in Big Bazaar. I picked him up. It's like they assume, the mindset is to assume that somebody with a disability or a different degree of ability, which is not what you have in your daily life, has to somehow lead a lesser life. That assumption has to be thrown out of the window first. Right? And technology is only last part of the puzzle. This is a very essential change in the way we think. Right? So we need to change first. And like Sir said in the beginning, I started my career in the US, and like I was telling everybody in the morning, my family still calls me an idiot for coming back to India, which I like, right? I like idiots. India likes 3 idiots a lot. Okay, so after that, everywhere I work, right, whenever there was a fire drill, I used to get a call half an hour earlier, Shakti, there's going to be a fire drill. I need you outside the building. I'm like, thank you very much. Next time the fire comes, ask him to call me, right? I'm sure the fire has my phone number. He'll call me half an hour earlier. I'll get out of the building. Right? Very simple. And where was I working? I was working on the 8th floor of a building in Bangalore. Believe me, when there was a real fire, I would be the fuel for the fire. Right? Given the amount of fat I have to burn, obviously. So, okay, let's get back to serious discussions, right? I was just trying to wake you up after lunch. So now, coming to technology, right? Today we are talking about big data. We talk about digital transformation. We talk about mobile lifestyles changing things for people. We talk about artificial intelligence making life easier. But then the driver for all this is the fact that, there is a proper sizing of a challenge that happens in the beginning. You estimate what is the marketability of your solution, and you should keep it profitable, right? When you're talking about roughly 70 million people in one of the most populous countries in the world, that is a no-brainer, right? But then why have we been not represented big time in the country in the last 60 plus years? Can anybody answer that for me? I'll tell you why. We are not a bloody vote bank. Excuse me for saying bloody on the stage. We are not a vote bank, right? Unless you're a vote bank, you don't get things done in the country. So I think it's time for us to become a vote bank first by unifying social thought, right? Then start solving problems. And we have technology nailed. Society is changing for the positive. All we need is us to drive the change, right? And don't overthink anything. Think of the simplest solution to a problem, right? Do not think of what will go wrong if I take this approach. Things that have to go wrong will go wrong. Right? You remove a CM from Bihar, he'll get his wife to be the CM next. You have to predict that. Right? And you have to work around that. Right? These are problems you have to deal with. But then, if you start thinking of problems when you start, you won't get anywhere. Right? The society's mindset is changing. Technology is evolving. We have people like Albina madam and Christy madam doing yeoman's work in the area of accessibility. Today in Bangalore, I can tell you when I came to Bangalore, I had to work from home for the first 4 years. Today in Bangalore, I go anywhere. Today, I've traveled to every continent in the world. I give speeches. I gave a speech I gave a talk in Malaysia last month, where I had the Deputy PM of Malaysia and the CEO of Huawei talking about digitally enabled accessible solutions for building a smart city, right? How is this possible? I call up her organization and I say, see, I have a flight at midnight. Can you send somebody to pick me up? They send somebody who understands my challenge, right? It's not just a ramp into a car they send somebody who understands my challenge. It is just an extension of being me. It's just an extension of being them. If you start thinking like them to solve the problem at its root, right? Solve the problem here. Like for example, if you are designing a device to help somebody to get up from his wheelchair that is battery operated, please think of using only dry cells and not wet cells, because wet cells cannot be checked into aeroplanes when you travel from point A to point B. This is a practical problem that only a disabled person can tell you. Right? So talk to your target population first, run it through them and start solving it. Right? Do not be Shashi Kapoor, God rest his soul. Try to be Amitabh Bachchan. Right? Because if you look at Amitabh Bachchan as a case study for adaptability, he is one of the best examples, right? He started as the angry young man. Then he became the guy who solves social problems. And today he is the grandfather who goes around, teaching things to his grandchildren. He's evolved with time, right? He's handled challenges gracefully. Try to be that in your mind, right? And I see a lot of school students here. I'm very happy that you're thinking about accessibility as something interesting and not just about Hrithik Roshan's bicep sizes, right? I'm very happy.
Bravo.
And I'm, how much more of the 10 minutes do I have? Just 1 minute? Okay, I'll tell you, there's one way to solve the accessibility divide. There is one way to solve the inclusion problem. Simple 3-word solution. Start with you. Thank you.
You know, it's very trendy to talk about people having different abilities. If there's one thing this panel had the ability to do, one was stick to time. It's the first panel I've ever chaired in my life where all 4 speakers stuck to time. That's not an ability many others have.
Do we get extra time for doing that?
Yeah. We have extra time to talk now. Yeah. Absolutely. Extreme juga for the global good. What a fabulous expression. I think it would almost define what ICRC has been trying to do for the last 150 years. We've never worked out the phrase that you could use.
Where do I send the bill for royalties?
That's going to be the viral tweet of this afternoon, I think. Humanity is in all of us, and it starts with you. Very clear messages. Thank you very much for that. Thank you to all the panel. I know, Mohan, you already have a couple of things you want to add on to bounce off what your colleagues have already come up with, and then I'm going to throw it immediately open to the audience for your questions and comments. I'm not going to get in the way here. I'll try to do a few things at the end. But first and foremost, Mohan, please.
Yeah. I have 3 points, not 2, but anyway. So the first part is that when you talk about innovation, when you talk about technology, does it have to be about technology at all? The answer is no. It doesn't have to be about technology at all. It has to be about how you solve a problem. Because we're talking about technology all over this place, right? I'll give you a simple example from my life. I can't walk on wet floors. Bathroom is a big challenge. If I fall, I have a backache for the next 4 days. I can't get up. I'm impaired for the next few days. I can walk a little, but very dangerous. I went all over the place when I was building my house to say, how do I put anti-skid tiles in my bathroom? Believe me, every anti-skid tile skids. That's what it is good at. Especially with soap water under your feet. Okay? So I sat down and said, man, this is not on. I can't stay with this. I can't run the risk of falling down and having this problem. So what did I do? I just observed. I came up with a solution. And each one of you can try this. If you have a thin, dry towel laid on the floor and step on it, it will slip. If you have a thick Turkish towel lying on the floor dry, it will slip. Have a wet Turkish towel on the floor, step on it, it gives you wonderful friction. So from that day, about 15 years ago, I buy 3 turkey towels every year, which I throw away. Every morning before I go to bath, the bathroom floor has a wet Turkish towel, and I can walk without fear. Wow. This is innovation.
Bravo.
Right? It doesn't have to be high tech.
Can I add a small thing to it, sir? Actually, I use a long Turkish mat and I change it once in 3 months. And I agree to this. This is the best thing after sliced bread, sir. Completely.
Right? Now, it is so useful. So somebody came and said, hey, I'm changing the tiling in my house. My dad is we're getting old. He runs the risk of slipping and falling. I said, don't waste your money. Simply buy 3 Turkish towels in a year and do this religiously. You're safer than putting in new tiles. You don't know if the new tiles will serve your purpose. Right? So that's one part. The second part about innovation is it's not technology, it is not the product, it's a process. We all talk about building products and so. No product is useful to me as a disabled person unless I can get it serviced or can have access to it where I am. The whole point about disability is I can't travel to go and buy a product. It is available close to my doorstep. And if I start using a product, I can't be without the product for service for say 3 days. So it must be serviceable at the last mile, and there must be availability at the last mile, which leads to distribution and servicing challenges when you think about how you will build products. Right? Intertwined with this is the cost of the product itself. So Deepa talked about scaling. And one aspect of scaling that I've always followed and has worked very well for me in the last 20 years is that disability as a market is a small market in numbers. We try to produce for disability, you will come up with small volumes. It will always end up with high costs. So one way of actually working around this problem is to look at using components or subcomponents that are used in other industries. Okay? Whose own volumes give you excellent economies of scale, and you could use those products for this particular innovation. You had Mahantish talk about mobiles. Golden example. Okay? You don't have to build a hardware. You can use a mobile as a base hardware on which you will build products. You can add on something to it. 2 problems in hardware. If you start manufacturing hardware yourself, getting into the service cycle and warranty cycle of hardware is extremely expensive. You should give it off to somebody else to do. And this advice that I've given to at least 30-40 startups in my career now has worked wonderfully well for them. And that is something one should do. So when somebody looks at building wheelchairs, for example, the wheelchair that I am on, if you see they use a wheel from a cycle. If they had tried to build a wheel exclusively for a wheelchair, it would be very expensive. But here I am, I can use a wheel of a cycle, a spoke wheel of a cycle for this chair. And that is how costs are brought down. And that is how you scale.
Bravo. Thank you very much. Nice to have that feeding on from the conversation before. Let me get out of the way. Let me invite all of you to make your questions or comments to our panel. Who is the first person who'd like to add some thoughts? In front of me right here, there's a gentleman.
Thank you so much, first of all, panelists, for sharing all that knowledge. My question to you is, well, when we design something or when we create something in general, why is it that disability is sort of a plug-in in that approach, whereas when we design for the people who are disabled, we somehow include everyone immediately? So for example, the SMS thing, it included everyone at an instant. But when we are designing something specifically for us, it sort of ignores people with disability.
So why is that?
I'll also introduce myself. I am Tigmanshu Bhatnagar. I'm from New Delhi, and I'm an industrial designer myself.
Thank you. So why is it we keep designing things that aren't inclusive?
Simple answer. Top of mind. Disability is not top of mind of the person who's envisioning the product.
Thank you. And Deepa, I think you mentioned we didn't have diversity in our team to think what was needed.
Yeah, so, to your point, I think it's a universal design that comes into play, right? And, we all are humans, and at some point in time, everyone breaks down. So, when you build a product specific for, like, so-called abled person or, if you start bifurcating them, I think that's when your product doesn't reach the global market, right? Or doesn't reach the masses. But when your product actually includes everyone, I think that's the universal design that we constantly keep talking about, right? So I think including everyone, when it, for example, technology is the biggest space to include everyone. You talk about Windows, right? Windows today, are doing extensive work to ensure their free accessibility tools are available for everyone to access. So when you talk about, when Windows started, the aim was, PCs at every home. That was the, like a vision behind Microsoft, right? But today, their aim is different. Their aim is ensuring everyone is included when the PCs are at home, right? Like you have a PC, and if it doesn't have like a screen reading software or a virtual keyboard, they know that people cannot access the computer, right? So they are building innovation which everyone can start using. So I think right, now it's changing according to how access can be given to everyone. I think that's where we have to look at, be it a restaurant, be it a service provider, be it a product. Can we look into building universal design products?
Thank you. Mahantesh.
Yeah, so only one quick word is, one is the developer or the entrepreneur might have ignored the existence of disability, or if he knows people with disability also exists, he may be thinking that they are not capable of buying this product. So I think these two might have led to the reason why they don't keep people with disability when they design certain things.
Thank you. Shakti, you wanted to add?
Yeah, a couple of points, right? One, this has to be inculcated in design schools, right? Like for example, there is a W3C standard that says everything should have an alt text when you put it online. How many of us do it? Questionable, right? When you design something, there are ways to help you design fast, there are ways to help you design best and all that. But three simple things, right? Can you use it with your eyes closed? Can you understand it with your ears closed? Can it work for you with your hands tied? You think about this when you design something. It's changing now, right? The Echo devices are here, the Kindles are here. Just having a Kindle and an Echo device in your home means that you can call out to Alexa and say, Alexa, read my book, and it starts reading the book out without you buying an audio book, right? All you need to do is cross that small bridge of asking AI to do that, or asking the tools you have to do that. Like I said, it's a change in the way you think, right? This cannot come from a school. This should come from you.
Mohan.
Yeah. So I'm now speaking as a designer. Okay. If you look at it, when you start defining the product for somebody with disability, then your lowest common denominator comes down drastically as compared to other products that you want to design. And that's the reason why it is amenable to everybody, the whole population. That's one. Secondly, when you start defining the specification, the design envelope for somebody with disability, then you're trying to solve harder problems than what you would normally try to solve. Okay? So the first thing that one would do is to say, let me solve the easy problem first. Let me get to the difficult problem later. Okay? So this is definitely a thought process that goes on. Okay? Now there are people also think the other way around. I mean, I was designing a router in the company. I was running the R&D. Then we took a different approach. We said, hey, can we build a product that switches about 1 million packets per second when the state of the art was 100,000 packets per second? Okay. Our logic was, does the market need 1 million packets? No, market didn't need 1 million packets. But we said, if you can design a router that can do 1 million packets per second, then we have dealt with problems of a different order, that anything, when you want to scale down the product from 1 million packets per second down to say 100 or 200 or 300, it is just flick of a switch. I've already solved the most important problem. I'm not going to hit bottlenecks. When I come to 300, something becomes a bottleneck. When I come to 500, something else becomes a bottleneck. When I hit 1 million, I've already solved all the bottlenecks that will be required for the speeds below. So it is a question of design thinking. How do you think? Do you want to solve the most important, the most difficult problem first, and then make sure the product will then work for all lower order problems? Or do you want to solve lower order problems first and then move a higher order?
Thank you. And I think that comes back to the disaster management. Often the volume is so high that we want to solve the majority problem quickly, and we don't always have the capacity to plan for everybody. But if we could plan for everybody and we did that well, we know we'd perform better for everybody, even for the majority. So thanks for that thinking.
Incompetent. Okay, here we go. My name is Tarun Sarwal. I work with the ICRC. In putting together this whole co-creation, the EnableMakeathon, we've really tried to make it inclusive. So what challenges are we going to work on? Who will select those? How will the teams come? How will they work with people with disabilities? Having teams with people with disability on them, the testing, the judging, everything. And yet I feel a kind of a growing feel of disquiet. And the feeling of disquiet is that somehow it still feels that we're going to be driving it. And I just wanted to ask the panel, is that how can we get persons with disability itself in the future to drive this process?
I'm already there, so I should not be saying.
As a group.
As a group. Yes. I think to your point, definitely. When I got an invite to be part of EnableMakeathon, the quick thing was, that's a right call that you guys took, right? That was my first reaction to the entire process that you had put together, right? Because it's by the people, for the people, right? And if you don't have the right voices, sounding it out, there's somewhere still you're going to be missing it, like the design solution. If you're going to think design, inclusive design as a last step, you're definitely going to not be able to adapt your product to everyone, right? So it has to be from the beginning. So for me, yes, for us to ensure that the innovators, use a test, right? For them to go ahead and use those products should reach more and more people. And we got to get those people on board, so that they have a hands-on feel of what we are building. And I think that's the best way to go. I think we have to take more people into this so we can make it successful. Yeah.
And adding to what she said, right, or more like continuing, make it mandatory for every team to have at least n number of, within double quotes, disabled people. I agree with the term, I don't agree with the term disabled, but still, right? That will ensure that, at every stage, the thought process also involves, the so-called outlier cases, the so-called boundary cases, the so-called exception cases, which will not be covered by the general thinking process, right? Once you do that at the grassroots level, when you're conceptualizing the solutions, right? Like she said, it will build stage after stage after stage. And my personal belief, I was talking to Christy ma'am while we were having lunch about this, right? You tell me, and I'll understand for some time, right? You write to me and I'll keep it somewhere. You involve me and I'll be with you till the end. That's where you solve it.
So one aspect is that observation. This is empirical data. This is not proven research, but I somehow feel if you have women in the team, having a better inclination for design for disability is better. This is something that I have seen by experience. So that's a good place to start.
So I want to advise my team here that I didn't pay either of these gentlemen. We had a lot of discussions about this as we were designing the process, about how much could we make it a prerequisite for a team to enter the process, to have these quotas. And we realized that if we put too many quotas, we might limit how many teams we get. We might increase the cost of the team's involvement. That's not the issue, but we were wondering if we would get enough teams involved. But thankfully, you've both put that question to rest. The next iteration, we're going to have to be even tougher on this than we were this iteration.
So what? We're talking about payments now? I just wanted to add a small
Sorry, if I can, just think it was really, really important that having a minimum quota of the target population, the people who you're designing for, driving the process from A to Z, clear. But bringing in the gender element was also a discussion we had internally. It's also clear. We see problems differently, and we come up, and it's exactly that diversity that was mentioned already on the panel that allows us to solve problems. So I think this message is coming systematically now for all of us, which is very, very helpful. So
let me just add a small data point to it, right? I work with some enterprises to actually get the ability challenge folks on board, right? And when we do skills matching, we see that I'm talking strictly out of data, absolutely no bias, nothing, right? When you look at people with an auditory challenge, most of the times their design instincts are above average, way off the charts, right? Add that person as your design guy. When you look at motor challenged people, their spatial perception is a survival skill to them. They'll help you with that, right? Add them for that role, right? Do not plug them in as an afterthought.
Diversity for performance, not as a rights issue, but as a performance issue. If you want to perform as a team and you're not diverse, you will underperform.
Then you're not a team.
It's quite simple. Yeah, very, very clear message. Back to the floor. Who's waiting? At the back there. Arun, please, go ahead.
Hello. I've been waving my hand for quite a while. I'm wondering the glad you.
See, it's after lunch.
Some exercise for you.
I know, right?
It's after lunch.
So I am a design engineer by training, and just as much as we talk about innovation, it is important that there be elegant solutions to solve problems. But then engineering solutions is really one facet of enabling impact.
Yes.
That has to be good and effective implementation, execution of said solution. Now, it's an observation that I have in India. There is, given that a lot of NGOs work in the disability space, there is seemingly subtle turf wars, in space on domains, because there is, beneficiaries that they have to impress the same pool of beneficiaries, and that makes it a little hard for solutions to go into grassroots levels. How can we as a platform ensure that there is healthy inclusion of not just the people but even the executioners, which is such NGOs? Yeah, there is being the charitable model and being dependent on the same pool of beneficiaries, they can still have a healthy mindset of working together amongst each other and effectively executing solutions. Does that make
last
sense?
mile delivery and the user community involvement.
Right, that is within the NGOs themselves, because
Within
you
the NGO
kind of
sector.
work with one NGO, then the other kind of stays away of sorts, and it's a little weird, I'll tell you that, from my observation.
I was waiting for somebody to bring this up because I want to present the NGO side of this. I work with a lot of NGOs, and they are not looking to compete with each other. I can tell you this with 200% confidence, right? You need to look at the problem from the NGO side. The average Indian is not funding the NGOs to solve critical problems, right? There is a set of people who want to make change. They are funding them, so they are accountable to them. Apart from that, I have myself worked in synergy with multiple NGOs where they've solved this delivery problem for many things. Like, for example, when Zomato decided to add accessibility as a part of the rating for a restaurant when you look it up, right? It needed cooperation from about 16 NGOs across the country to roll that out, and that happened in less than 3.5 months. Now, if there was push and pull between NGOs to get this done, it couldn't have gone live even now. Not that I'm saying it's the best implementation, right? But then we need to come from the other side also. When you start the project, right? If you look at the Software Engineering Institute, and if you have studied software engineering as part of your curriculum, right? There is this nice term, in BITS we used to call it LMDP, right? When I did my master's at BITS, last mile delivery problem, right? That is not an execution problem, that is a planning problem. That's what you need to plan for first and not last, right? So first you start with the population that gave you the problem definition, start involving them, right? Every NGO has its population pool that's willing to lend itself to you. Use them as stakeholders and not your implementation or beta testers. Right? Then you will see that competition goes away, effectiveness increases. My 2 cents.
Thank you very much. It echoes very much the lesson that I got when I first started out in ICRC. I thought I was a bright young thing. I was young. I wasn't so bright.
Oh, I was young once.
There were so many good ideas that I couldn't work out why my institution wasn't willing to fund these good ideas. Let's go and do it. And I finally realized that the criteria on which my seniors in the Red Cross were judging every project was the feasibility from the user community point of view.
Yeah.
And if my hierarchy wasn't convinced that the field was involved with the assessment and that they felt that it was feasible, money wouldn't come. But I'm not just saying this because my governance is here, but if we can prove that it is feasible to get the result, then the funding comes. We have a capacity or delivery-based budgeting process in the ICRC where we say, if we think we're acceptable, if we think we can work with people for the problem, if we think that the people who have the problem see this as the solution, then we can propose a budget and then we can have that discussion with Geneva. So that's something I learned to my frustration, I learned that very early in my career.
Just thought I
Sorry, one last point from both panelists, and then one last round of questions before we close.
Sure. I think that adds even with the corporates, right? We, cannot go all way out, but then somewhere, if we find the connect of what the vision of the corporate is, and how do we involve our partners, and we make that click. Just for an example, we have a True Ability Charter, which is about employing people with disabilities on board and ensuring they have inclusive workforce, right? But then, we started industry's first profound internship program. It was for people with severe and multiple disabilities, right? And for a corporate like Dell to pick it on and to drive that for 1.5 years was just because we could make, the connect. While we want to have more resources on board, we always found it challenging to get those kind of skill set. So we kind of reversed it. We said we will train people. And what kind of people? People with severe disabilities or multiple disabilities. They do not get opportunities in mainstream, right? So we went ahead and did that. But we always have like a ceiling, right? We cannot go beyond certain things. While as a diversity or as a disability advocate, like Jeremy, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds great. Can we do it? But maybe the organization is not aligned to what we are going ahead with. But if it really matches and syncs, I think that's where we make the big connect, right? So we have to find that partnerships so that we can take it forward.
Thank you. Mohan, you had a quick thing on this?
Yeah. So I come from the NGO space. So I can tell you, I'm talking to you as an NGO. NGOs collaborate. NGOs have very little overlap, realistically speaking, in their beneficiary population. The penetration of NGOs in the Indian scenario is about 8 to 10% of the beneficiary population, potential beneficiary population. We are the best vehicles, and still our penetration is 10%. Government is abysmal. Okay, so there may be instances where one may feel there is competition, but there's very little scope for competition because there is so much to do. So there's so much unmet needs that the NGOs have still not tapped. There is a huge playground available there. So from the NGO world, I will say, I don't see competition.
We're complementary, actually.
Can I get 2 seconds? Just 2 seconds.
We're running out of time. Mahantesh, did you want to?
I'll give it back to you after.
Yeah. So just I was adding to Mohan sir. So we complement each other, and we are a complementary partners in most cases, most situations. We work very closely, share our ideas, resources, plans, and collaborate, as you said.
One of the ways of making sure that competition does not exist is the reason why we formed this federation of NGOs in disability called DNA. If you go through an apex body like that, then the competition, so-called competition issues will get resolved on their own.
One sentence, Shakti, before we go back to the floor.
NGOs don't have to be profitable, but they are still accountable, right?
Correct.
That's all.
Thank you. Okay, we have time just for one last little round. We're going to do 2 or 3 questions at once. So there's 2 ladies at the back I can see. Okay, so please.
Thank you,
2
Jeremy.
questions back there before we...
I'm vertically challenged, and I thought if you don't let me speak, I'm going to stand on the chair, right? But thank you. Couple of things that I want to share as someone who is a part of an inclusive school. Thank you, ICRC and Arun Cherian, for having me through the process, and my colleagues in leadership, and my children in this final round of their experiencing the work of people who worked with EnableMakeathon too. I realized through these discussions and our experiences as an inclusive school is one, the disability spectrum that Mohan sir spoke about. I'm vertically challenged. I'm visually challenged without my glasses, my lenses, right? I am orthodontically challenged because I have a couple of fits inside. And as I grow older, I'm sure I'm going to be hearing impaired and many, many things. So I think this is something that everybody and society needs to know. And this is a question that was asked was, why is it that when we make devices, we don't, when we make devices for the challenged, we don't have a market? That's because there is no awareness. I had to understand disability when I moved to the United States to do a Fulbright program. I didn't see people in India around. So I think somewhere, and I think it starts at schools, that we let children know that disability exists, it's a spectrum, and they are productive, which comes to another point that I learned. If you're challenged, you're woman and you're poor. Deadly combination, right? And we don't have, other than one person, I would like EnableMakeathon 3 to have more women from these 3 sectors be a part of EnableMakeathon, because we are such a huge population and we are not there, right? So that was one thing. The third was, what we do in society today is not about making someone independent or making someone dependent on someone. I think it's the ecosystem that someone spoke about of interdependence. We all need one another, and that needs to go further on. But great initiative. We're thrilled to be a part of this as a school environment, and we have children with special needs. Here amongst us is Mrigna, who's type 1 diabetic, and she is one of the most active people we have in school. And she's been on insulin injections since she was in kindergarten. So Mrigna, will you please stand up for the audience to see what you're doing? But thank you for this. And we'd like such events to happen at school level as well, because a lot of good brains are there wanting a platform. So we must run an EnableMakeathon at school level, and DPS Bangalore North would be delighted to host it and to co-partner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such a great support to us to have DPS on board and to have the education awareness element continuously reinforced through your involvement in the project. We can't disagree with anything that you've mentioned. Thank you so much. And I think you've just put the obligation on all the panelists for a few more speaking engagements in your school and elsewhere, even if some of them have been there before.
Yeah, and I'm diabetic too, so.
Yeah, and another point, I am a woman, comes from, build my own career, and I'm disabled. It's the most deadliest combination. It's like a kick-ass combination, but yeah, you got to make it through. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very, very much, everybody. We have to call it to a close because of timing now. What I've realized first and foremost is that Mohan can speak to you from any space you like, corporate, person with disabilities, NGO, designer. We didn't give him time enough to speak from all the other spaces he comes from, so thank you so much. I want to thank all the other colleagues on the panel. What you have proven to us again, that not only do we have to listen and involve, we perform better if we do. And I really appreciate that the message came across from each and every one of you and from the floor that that is true. Message came clearly also, it's not really about the technology. That's just one of the enabling elements. It's about the process. And that was clearly determined in every intervention. It's about potential. It's about potential with people of different abilities that we're missing out on. And it's about potential for our community as a whole to go forward, be more efficient, more productive, and more unified. And there are 100 other messages there. I'm not going to spend all your time with my observations on it. I'll just ask you to thank those people to whom we had the opportunity and honor to listen to today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really,
I'm going to ask the panelists not to leave just yet. Yes, I know. I made it just in time.
Oh, so the payment talk was serious, is it?
Yeah, so where is finance?
You'll get a gift coupon.
Thank you.
Okay, but on a side note, there is coffee and snacks. I know some of you are already hungry. I think especially the babies at the back are hungry. So there's cookies outside and all of that. We've come to the end of the day, but I have the pleasure of introducing to you Tarun Sarwal, Head of Innovation. I will read out his CV, but no, I'm kidding. But aside from innovation, I think what's important for all of us in the EnableMakeathon and the co-creation was similar to what you said, that we all thought we were these bright young things with great ideas, and at every step, Tarun drove us nuts, saying, you have to involve the stakeholders, you have to rethink the process. And we've spent a good 200 hours in the last few months rethinking the process because of this. So Tarun has worked in the UK NGO sector with the British Red Cross and on issues on economic security, and he's been responsible for promoting cash-based approaches and overseeing the designing of programs in Africa, Asia, and the Caucasus. Today, he's involved in setting up the Innovation Initiative at the ICRC, and the purpose of the post is to facilitate innovation and the support of humanitarian action. He manages an internal fund, and this is an outcome of, among many other initiatives that he leads. Please put your hands together for Tarun.
I'm certainly not going to make a speech. I just want to thank, actually, I sit there in front. There's a whole group of people out here. There are a whole group of people who've organized the event. There's a whole group of people who are coming and helping out in the co-creation. And, for some reason, I get, people say, Tarun's done a good job. Honestly, it's not been me. It's been, the 200 hours of work that's gone in. It's been the communications team that has been running around. You can see them in action out here. It's been people like Mohan, people like Nihal, Arun, Sanjana, Manas, who is the kingpin, who every single person in this hall must have got an email from. Who really brought this thing together. All I want to say is that, this is a kind of, we feel it's a unique thing because it's genuinely collaborative. We have had one rule: don't enter this process unless it's something that you are getting out of it. We don't want you to come in unless you also are getting something out of it. And through this, just one statement that we made again and again, so many people have come to collaborate. And so many people, it feels like a family. We're really interested in building this movement. We're really interested in having persons with disability drive it in different ways to expand it the way that they would like. And I would ask that all of us here are ambassadors to that process. So I'm going to stop there. I'd like to call Christine back onto stage just to give thanks, because I think Christine, and the whole of the panel here, that's Jeremy too, Mohan, Mahantesh, Deepa, and Shakti. I think by your presence here, I think you've raised the whole notion of what we're doing. We could have just been talking about having a co-creation event, about going through the technical parts of it, but I think you've reminded us back that it's about society. It's about us as an individual, and it's about humanity fundamentally. And thank you for that. And I think this message should go out loud and clear to everyone. Thanks very much. And then I just asked the panel and Christine to actually meet the most important people in the room. The most important people in the room being the teams who have come to do their co-creation and beyond out here. I just want to call out their names, just so that I just like hearing the names of all the teams. So there's Bleetech. Can you put up your hands, Bleetech? Where is Bleetech? Okay. Well, yes, and there are women. There are women in Bleetech. Women innovators, fantastic. Autobots, yes, also with some late edition women in the team. Workbench, you've left your women behind, but I know you have women leading the team. Unicorn Solutions, really nice to have you here. Enable India, anybody from Enable India? Oh, Tridots, very, very difficult one you've got on. Chabla Oil, all the way from Finland. Torchit from Ahmedabad. Already an innovator, trying to do multiple innovations at the same time. Were you working through the session as well? Yeah. For growth, We Lava, male and female team, excellent. And finally, Project Defy. They were just here. Okay, all right. I think, Christine, if you can go and all members of who've come outside to go and talk to the teams, we've asked them to bring the products that they're working on or some ideas of what they're working on, so you can get to know what everyone is doing.